All right. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen. We are back at it. What's up, Rack Shadow? I am Joe, aka the Stoic Viking. And today we are going to be picking up about where we left off. We're going to backtrack a little bit today. So, anybody who was in the stream, we were here talking about the video that I put out on Saturday about my tier rankings for the World Special Forces units. Obviously, I could not include every single Special Forces unit in the entire world because I included I think 15, 16, maybe 17 units. Math is hard. And the video is 2 hours. So instead of trying to make like a 10-hour video, which I know none of you would watch because you would see 10 hours, and because all of you guys have the attention span of a goldfish, we'll not be doing that. So we're going to separate this into parts. So everybody, that video was pretty well received. And we have then decided, at the request of now hundreds of people, we will now do a part 2 and possibly a part 3, because the amount of units that you guys are coming into the comments with suggesting, I don't even think we can cover in part 2. So part 3 is a possibility. So, but we're going to talk about real quick. We're going to go back to kind of the things that we talked about the other day, which was, let me go back through my notes. Oh, Rack Shadow, since you're already in here, Trump tard done gone full retard. Wow, that's a mouthful to say. Why don't you tell us what did big bad orange man do this time? What's up, Paul Thompson? Good morning, brother. All right, so we did the video on Saturday. Obviously, I ranked the World Special Forces, and now let's talk about it, and let's help to build part 2. So, all right, guys, we're in the live. We're a lot of people, if you haven't seen the comments, obviously there are a lot of people that were offended by that I didn't include their country. And there's a lot of people who are offended because I didn't put their specific country's units or their favorites. You know, everybody's got favorites like sports teams at the top. You know, I know there was a bunch of British people who thought SAS and SBS should be at the top, and that's completely understandable because they are the OG, especially the SAS. You know, Canada wanted a lot of Canadians in here wanted the JTF2 up at the top, right? A lot of people complained about other things and my rankings, and some people thought I was biased because I was American, right? So I want everybody who doesn't already know my background, all right? So I started out as a support person for a Special Forces unit because I was medically disqualified from becoming an operator, but I was given the opportunity to go to a Tier 1 unit as an operator, and I did. And luckily, and why I think this is important within this video, is I was to join the most secretive of the American Tier 1 units, which is commonly known as Intelligence Support Activity, or ISA, or Task Force Orange, or TFO. And why that is important is because I was immediately assigned to the tactical detachment within that unit. And the tactical detachments unit with ISA is to work tactically with the other Tier 1 units. And actually, let me back up. ISA is essentially was supposed to be the Army's version of the CIA. What it ended up being was a sort of a bridge between the gap between the CIA and Delta Force and the other Tier 1 units. And because I was in a detachment within ISA, and because ISA is a national mission force with a national scope, we go everywhere in the world before there's an issue, just like the CIA does, because we want people in there. And because of that, I was in a unit that probably works with more foreign special operations units than anybody else. And I also was in the specific detachment of that unit that worked with all the Tier 1 units. So I have actually worked with almost every single unit that is currently on this list. And I understand that a lot of people may think that SAS and SBS and a lot of these other units should be up there because, you know, let's just take SAS as an example. They are the grandfather. They're the big daddy of Tier 1 special operations. They walked so we could run. But that doesn't mean that they're at the top anymore, right? And there's a number of different reasons for that. And to their defense, it's not their fault. It is circumstances. It is the way that they've been managed through their own country, their own defense departments. I don't know exactly what it's called over there in England. And then just the way that they do things, the way that we have done things has sort of influenced who as an organization is more effective, not the individual operators, because I think that's a lot of people think that is what I'm getting at. I am not saying SAS operators are tier A and Delta Force operators are S plus. As a matter of fact, I'm not saying that. I think a lot of ways they're very even. Most tier one, I feel like most tier one operators as individuals are probably around the same level. The difference is does the organization is effective? And that comes into a lot more different factors. And one of the ones that a lot of people don't want to realize and want to accept. And you don't understand this until you have worked alongside, if you have been in American special operations and worked with a foreign special operations, or you're somebody who's in a foreign special operations who worked with it alongside an American special operation, you do not see the difference in funding, capability, and support. It is night and day. Like, I was flabbergasted with how little support and funding foreign special operations have in comparison to ours. I assumed all special operations throughout the world, because they're special operations, especially the tier one units, got the same level of funding as we did, because your country's tier one. Unfortunately, that is not the case. And that is one of the biggest differences. This is not an American bias, because as a matter of fact, I love foreign special operations. I probably like some of the people in foreign special operations than I do in American special operations. So this is not an American bias, right? As anybody who's known me long enough, I'm a very, very analytical person. And I do my best to be completely unbiased, right? I will call a spade a spade. If there are Americans doing shit, I will call them the fuck out. I don't give a fuck. So, I didn't see Meal Team 6. I'm sorry. That's good. Yeah. I remember the memes for that stuff. So, all right, I'm getting on a bit of a tangent. But anyways, you guys understand what I'm talking about. So as far as the issue, what ended up happening is I have learned how to stream with a camera that's on my phone. The camera was thought was plugged in, was not plugged in, and it ran out of battery. So I apologize. I'm an idiot. Apparently technology sucks, and I suck at it. All right. Anyways, let's get to the disclaimer, because I know what you keyboard warriors are trying to get me at. So before we get into this, I want to clarify something. This ranking is based entirely on publicly available information. I am not confirming or denying anything based on my previous military experience. I am not discussing classified capabilities, operations, techniques, or anything else that shouldn't be discussed publicly. Everything that we're talking about today can be researched through publicly available sources, because that's how I do it. I may have inside knowledge, but I don't use that inside knowledge. What I do is I research all this stuff publicly, and then, because usually there's a lot of BS out there, there's some true and there's not. I know which is true, which is not, and I am able to discern that. But I just use publicly available information. I might hint at some things, but it is what it is. And also, this is my ranking. It is subjective. It is my motherfucking opinion. There is no FIFA ranking system for special operations units. There isn't some international organization keeping official statistics of Delta Force versus SAS. So I created specific criteria and ranked the units based on those criteria, and you're probably allowed to disagree with me. Maybe not, but I'm going to allow it this time. You're allowed to disagree with me. Maybe just this once. And in fact, there's part of the reason why I'm doing this live, and it's just to make an argument. Because, honestly, one thing I love since I started this channel and streaming, I do love to rage bait people. I do fucking find it hilarious. If anybody's seen my videos on atheists versus religious people, that triggered some fucking people. All right, so let's talk about how I rank the units, right? And then we'll get into everything else. All right. So my criteria are training and individual operator skill, mission authorities, operational effectiveness, funding, equipment and technology, innovation, adaptability, and organizational culture. And I want to get back, I want to highlight something. Funding, equipment and technology, and innovation, right? Equipment and technology and innovation are propelled by funding. And you may not think this is as big of a difference, but when you see the difference of American special operations, especially at the tier 1 level, because let's be honest, they almost have no limit to their funding. And then you put them alongside any foreign special operations, even the foreign tier 1 units, it is night and day, right? And that affects equipment and technology. It affects innovation. It even affects training. And then also then affects how quickly a unit can adapt, because you need money to do all that. And then last is organizational culture, which is what I harp on quite a bit, because even at the American level, anybody who's seen my podcast with Mike Ritlin, and I've talked about this in other podcasts, as awesome as SEAL Team 6 and ISA are, they are two very toxic organizations. Not everybody is toxic within that unit, but it's a relative comparison. All right, don't come at me. As compared to something like Delta Force, RRC, and 24th STS, which are both, all three of them are very professional, right? So, all right, we're going to segment right here because I just saw a question, all right, which this comes up quite a bit. I'm going to be honest. All right, legendary Focus 100, Bo, you are on the spot. Are TFO guys support? So first of all, what do you even determine is support? Is a support person generally, right? If you want to, is someone who is supporting some other operation. If you are at the tip of the spear and you are the one doing the work, and then you have people behind you who are supporting you, you're probably not support. So people think because TFO guys are intelligence-centric discipline that they're support, because in other units, like if you go to Green Berets, SF, yeah, you're SIGINT guys, you're support guys. But that's not how ISA thinks, because just like in the CIA, they have intelligence operatives who are their cutting edge. They're not support. And ISA wanted intelligence operatives, which would later be referred to as operators as well. And they get the same pay. They have the same status as SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force operators. They all get AIP. And when you go to ISA, there's a support selection and there's an operator selection. So when you go there, you become an operator or you become a support person, right? I went to operator selection and I had support people who worked for me. And when I was doing operations, I wasn't supporting really anybody. There were times when I was at the tactical detachment where I was attached to Delta Force and SEAL Team 6, and I definitely helped to support them. But I was also, because we were at the operator level, we were getting AIP, and we went to operator selection that was just cloned off of Delta Force, and we went to our own ATC, which is actually even longer because we have our own skill set and we have our own primary skill set. We are a lot of cases we were considered like they're equals, not like they're SIGINT support. So this is a common question that I get, and I hope this answers it, but ISA operators are not support, right? Because they do their own missions. Like there are many times where I was out and I was either in onesies and twosies and I was the only person and I wasn't supporting anybody, but I had people supporting me. No, you're not a one-man army, but I'll tell you, if you understand anything about intelligence operations, if you roll in a squad of bros, let me tell you, you're not going to get much intelligence done. Intelligence is typically done as, what do you call it? Intelligence is done subtly, right? Because if you're doing intelligence and people can tell you're doing intelligence, you're probably not going to get much intelligence. So do shooters work in teams? Yes. Do intelligence operatives work in onesies and twosies? Yes, because you have to have a limited profile. So it is what it is. All right, so let's continue. I appreciate you, Rack Shadow. All right. Anyways, let's continue. So we've already talked about funding in the previous video. I'm not going to kind of harp on this even more. All right. So if all right. So one of the questions that I got, and I saw this quite a bit, which was in the SAS conversation, was because a lot of people cannot understand that because SAS is the original tier 1 unit, not why they're not in S plus, why they're not above all these other units. If you go online, and I will show you something real quick, and obviously we're not going to sit here and watch the entire fucking video, but there are multiple peoples from SAS who have went online already and have basically talked about the difference of how Delta Force and these other tier 1 units is that there's such a huge difference of how they do operations because of the funding, right? And so let's go ahead and play this, and let me know if you guys can.
Team. I have never been so impressed by a team as I have with those guys there as assaulters, and I say this with the utmost respect to everyone else. The best assault teams that I've ever worked with, just primarily on shooting and CQB and assaulting. There's nothing on earth that compares to those fucking guys in that unit. And in my team, I had like 4 first draft picks from OTC, so they were fucking rock stars. Shit. I have never been so impressed by a team.
All right, so there's a couple of different things there. So he talks about like how awesome Delta, and so he's an SES guy, and he was attached to Delta Force. He worked with A and B Squadron, and he's not the only one. There's multiple SAS operators, and even some SBS operators who've come out and have actually talked about this, right? And one of the reasons is this is where all the funding comes in. This is where how the American special operations have this tendency to bring all the types of capabilities and put them all organically all within an organization, and the funding that the tier 1, especially the tier 1 level, has, they're able to do that. And then also at the very end, I like this, he talks about how we got OTC #1 round draft picks. When you graduate OTC, the 4 Saber squadrons at Delta Force, and DEVGRU does this as well, they actually have a draft pick, and each squadron actually gets they get to pick which OTC. They literally have a draft pick. So when he's talking about that they have a #1 round, they got all 4 #1 draft picks, that's actually a thing that actually happens at DEVGRU and Delta. So all the squadrons, and typically, so each squadron has its own personality. And typically, if you are usually drafted into a squadron where they believe your personality will match the most. So, and every squadron, especially in Delta, is pretty well known for their individual personality. So,
as an SAS operator, how was your experience working with Delta Force?
Those guys were fucking rock stars. Honestly, I have never been so impressed by a team as I have with those guys there as assaulters, and I say this with the utmost respect to everyone else. The best assault teams that I've ever worked with, just primarily on shooting and CQB and assaulting. There's nothing on earth that compares to those fucking guys in that unit. And in my team, I had like 4 first draft picks from.
Right. I thought this was a different video. I had placed them slightly differently. I apologize. So ISA does not do draft days. Not really. So when you come in, you're kind of, after you go through selection, you're already kind of chosen, because there's 2 main intelligence disciplines for operators, and you're chosen which one you're going to go down. And then I was actually, so in the in the SI squadron, is where the unit's tactical detachment is. And typically you can't go to the tactical detachment until you've been on a full unit member for at least 3 years. And I was chosen early to expedite that process. And I was allowed to go to the tactical detachment probably 6 months after I graduated OTC, and which was awesome because I got fast tracked for free fall jump master, all these different tactical courses in order so I could better be attached to both Delta Force and SEAL Team 6. So I was probably the only person who got drafted early, if you will, because there isn't really a draft day, but I technically did get drafted for the tactical detachment. So wouldn't the difference between down to the fact that SAS focused more on tradecraft and more general stuff while CAG is more DA focused? No, I would actually disagree with that. SAS doesn't actually focus more on tradecraft. Actually, CAG also does DA. They do just as much tradecraft as the SAS does. You have to remember Delta Force is essentially took the model of the SAS, and that's how they do everything. The Saber Squad, the organizational structure, they're even the training plans, and then they have taken what they had and then combined with the funding and the sort of how the American intelligence organization structure, which the difference between the British is what you have all these different capabilities and all these mechanisms, and instead of keeping them in separate units and having them support each other, they all bring them into these units, and they grow them organically so they become self-sustaining units. And they have grown past what the original model of the SAS was. So they actually do more operationally. They have a larger breadth of operations than even the SAS do. And because of funding, and they have probably, and like, as you can tell from a lot of SAS operators, and this is not the only one, I think there's I had a quote of 5 different ones who have all come out and said that Delta Force has surpassed SAS. And a lot of that comes down to funding and the way that the American tier 1 and intelligence services work. Good to see you all as well. All right. So let's talk real quick, my Delta versus DEVGRU, right? Okay, so both of them are elite, and in a lot of different ways, they are the exact same organization, and almost in every single way, right? Let me remove this. So why is SEAL Team 6 in S and Delta Force is S+? And this really comes down to organizational culture, right? And I've talked about this numerous different times, is that there is a level of professionalism that exists at Delta Force where not only do the operators revere their support personnel, that they will even go to the point where if a operator was ever to like haze or even give any support guys any trouble, they could lose their job. That is not how it is at DEVGRU, right? And obviously every squadron is different, and they're not every SEAL Team 6 guys like this. But I can tell you from having to interact with both the SWIC guys, because I did a number of things with SEAL Team 6, but I also went to free fall jump master course there. And when I was there doing, I believe I was doing the free fall jump master course with Silver Squadron, and half the class was assaulters / frogmen, and the other half of the class was their SWIC guys, or their boat guys. They did not like each other. And almost every day, there was insults being thrown across. I felt like there was going to be fights. It was entertaining for me to watch. And I talked to a number of the SWIC guys, and they do not like how their assaulters at SEAL Team 6 treat them like second-class citizens, right? And the SIG and support guys who we would go there and talk to, just because we kind of are like the pinnacle of their profession, were scared to death of their frogmen or their assaulters. Delta Force, they love their support guys. And the quality of life at Delta Force for a support guy is 10 times better than it is over at SEAL Team 6. And when you have that sort of really positive culture, it definitely affects other things. Support people are more willing to go above and beyond outside of their job to help their guys when they're loved by their operators. So, did SEAL Team 6 get Bin Laden? Yes, they did. SEAL Team 6 did an awesome job. They are an amazing organization when it comes to shooting. I'm not selling them anything short. I'm just saying, if I wanted to separate the units for something, right? That both the 5 tier 1 units, right? As you can see, all 5 tier 1 units are American tier 1 units are the 3 top, right? And you might think there's some sort of American bias here, but it's not. The reason why it's like this, right? The reason why, okay, since we're on this subject, right? Well, I'm going to go into a tangent real quick, but let's finish, right? The top 3 are the 3 main operational tier 1 organizations that do their own operations, right? The reason why RRC is an A+ is they are significantly smaller than the top 3. Like orange, blue, and green, which is Delta Force, ISA, and SEAL Team 6, are much larger organizations with a much larger funding and scope and missions. And then 24th STS, they're essentially tier 1 enablers, right? The 24th STS is not really like all your combat controllers, all your guys on the ground. Like obviously the Air Force does their own operations, but the 24th STS isn't doing their own, they're not spearheading their own operations like Delta, SEAL Team 6, and ISA are. So that's why that they're down below. And then the only separation between the top 3 main operational ones is the fact that both ISA and SEAL Team 6 are kind of toxic. And Delta is way more professional, has a much more positive environment. Yes, I gave SAS a B+, and it has to do with funding. And like I said, if you haven't seen it, because I've worked with both the British SAS and the Australian SAS, and the difference between us and them is night and day, and most of it has to do with funding. Funding affects so many other different things under it. I'm using it sort of as an umbrella term, but it affects so many different things. Is TFO under USASOC? I'm going to be honest, I actually don't know what TFO is currently in. Mind you, I left TFO 8 years ago. So whether or not they've changed, it wouldn't be surprised if ISA has been under a number of different umbrella commands for a number of different reasons. Is 24th STS tier 1? Yes, 24th STS is a tier 1 organization. 24th STS also supports tier 2 elements. And the inner workings of how they determine who works where and all this stuff like that, I'm not 100% sure of exactly how that is. So I'm not going to discuss it because I really only want to talk about the things that I particularly know. But 24th STS is JSOC designated tier 1 unit. And when you're a tier 1 unit, when you're designated by JSOC a tier 1 unit, you are given a certain level of funding. So that's what tier 1 really means in this world. That's where it matters, is funding. Let's see. I would have thought about doing a ranking with federal paramilitary units. It would be cool to include what you know about them, mainly ones that integrate with DoD. And that's definitely an option. Obviously, people came up were like, why did you use GIGN and not FBI HRT? Well, because the French GIGN is actually a military organization and FBI HRT is not. But since that's come up, there is definitely, we could definitely apply this model, this analytical model, to the federal paramilitary units. And I'm definitely down with doing that. I obviously wanted to focus on this because I have more intimate knowledge of these units because I've worked with most of these. So, it is what it is. But that's definitely a consideration for possibly part 3 or however long we want this series to go for. I wonder if DEVGRU will get or has been passed up for future missions after the drama they captured about the UBL raid. No, I don't think so, because you know, every unit has their own drama, right? And obviously SEAL Team 6 probably has a little bit more drama than Delta does. And Delta is doing its best to try to keep and rein their guys in. But they're definitely not going to not be given missions, because they are just as good as shooters as Delta. Like, that's one thing I want to make very, very clear. They are just as awesome tactically, and to get the job done, they're just as good as Delta. Just the culture is a little bit more positive as Delta. That's basically all I'm saying, which is why they're S plus, and Delta and SEAL Team 6 is in the S category. So would you put a tier 2 11B Ranger right alongside SAS? No, I would not. All right, I will tell you this, and we'll get back to this, right? Just because SAS is in the A category does not mean the individual operator is A quality, right? So typically, to get to most of these tier 1 organizations, you have to go, like, yep, typically, right? I always I'm an exception to that rule. But most people go to tier 2 special operations, and then you go to selection for tier 2, and then you go to selection for tier 1, right? Usually the guys who make it in these foreign tier 1s, like the British SAS, are the same quality of human being that are at Delta and SEAL Team 6. The difference is, does their organization supports them better and gives them more capabilities. So the individual that is a 11B, like who's a Ranger infantry soldier, is not the same quality as a British SAS guy, and that's why they're not the same category. The difference is the organization, right? To get to that level in the British SAS, that it's a tier 1 unit for a reason. Yeah, okay, so if you guys have noticed, anybody who doesn't know this, so if you look in the A category, the very far left, that is the symbol of the British SAS. On the B plus category, at the very bottom right, you'll notice a very similar symbol, just it's slightly different color. That is the Australian SASR. They have the same motto, which is "Who dares wins." The difference is the Australian SAS chose the symbol and their motto to copy it off the British SAS, and they just changed the color, right? The reason why the Australian SAS is B plus is because for 2 reasons. They actually have less funding than the British SAS do, right? And then also the Australian SASR actually does counterterrorism, but they actually share their responsibility with the Australian commandos. They actually do a lot of focus on reconnaissance. Like, they are one kind of, think of like RRC, right? So it really comes down to the main reason is they have a lot less funding than the British SAS, and they are hamstringed by that. But I will tell you, the Australian SAS are amazing that they get done with what little funding that they do have, which is actually impressive. It impressed the shit out of me, because they like, when you think the British SAS has less funding, the Australian SAS has even less funding. Where is GROM in this ranking? All right. I would probably say, outside of the Canadian JTF2, the Polish GROM was the second most highly requested unit for this list. The Polish GROM, and I'm not going to give this away, but the Polish GROM will be in part 2. The Canadian GTF2 and the Polish GROM those are probably 2 of the front runners from this list. So I'm not going to spoil it. Where do you, my friend, I'm not even going to attempt to say your YouTube name, where do you think GROM would be in this ranking? And remember, try to use my analytical model for this, right? Not just the operationals, the individuals, but look at, like, where does this unit do as far as, do they have a good culture? How much funding do they have relatively to the rest of these people? So you're gonna ask if I was to fit the 160th in here, because even though they probably don't fit within the rankings perspective, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't include them. I can re-look at it and try to see how they fit within here, because it's really hard to rank an aviation unit within this group, right? And it's not just like an aviation unit, it's basically only a helicopter aviation unit. And then if we were going to do that, then we'd have to, if we were going to include 160th, then we might have to be including the artist formerly known as E Squadron, or the Virginia Boys. And then there's the SEAL Team 6 Aviation Squadron, and a couple other ones. So I'm going to relook at the 160th because it's really hard to compare them, because funding for aircraft, when you're looking at funding for a unit, once you introduce aircraft, it's harder to tell how funding matches up, right? These organizations, like these counterterrorism, these unconventional warfare, these special reconnaissance, where you have individuals who are doing the work, and other than the equipment that they carry on the back or the equipment that they're used to infiltrate into the objectives, it's really hard to gauge funding when you start bringing in when your organization is based upon aircraft. I hope that makes sense. But I will definitely look back into it, because you're not the only person who asked me about 160th and where they would be on this list. Yeah, don't know what that means. You're gonna have to translate that to English. I wonder if support roles would rank the same as the units they support. I would guess support is highly impacted by budgets. Yes, well, just overall, right? Like it's the operators get the support is a part of the organization, right? So if they don't have the funding, then the support person are a part of that pipeline, right? And that's also another thing. Do they have the manpower to actually, and the money, because money affects manpower. Yeah. So legendary focus. So Aussies and Marines are similar with a funding to performance ratio. No. So that's the thing is, right? So MARSOC probably has more funding than the Australian SAS. Actually, I know for a fact MARSOC has more funding, but I would say the quality of the operator is higher, which is why they're in B+, right? Because they are probably the better operator, but they have significantly less funding, and which is why they're in the same category with I'm sorry, I messed up. MARSOC is not in that category. So MARSOC is down here in B. They're in the bottom of B. My bad. I messed that up. So I actually put Australian SAS above them. And the reason why that they are in the same category as both SF, Rangers, and SEALs is I actually consider their operators of a higher tier, but all three of these organizations, the American Tier 2 Special Operations, have significantly more funding. So I would actually find that their capability to be somewhere kind of meets in the middle of operators may not be as good, but have a higher funding organization and kind of meet somewhere in the middle. And then MARSOC has a lot more issues going on right now. They're currently fixing them, but that's why they're the lowest special operations unit in this list. But my next video that's coming out explains this, and it's a video just about MARSOC and explains why that they are rated as the lowest American special operations unit on this list. Graphic affairs. They are aviation and not operators. Yes, that's a good point. That's also another thing that it's also hard to rank them within this thing. So one second. Someone's calling me. All right. So all right, if you guys are going to come in here and use acronyms, all right, because there's so many acronyms in my head, make sure you spell out the acronyms, because I don't remember every single acronym, right? It would help me. All right. So if you're going to put a special operations unit in here, I would like you guys from now on you can put the acronym, but I want you to put the country it's from, and I want you to spell out the acronym. That would help me. All right. Because I'm retarded and I need help sometimes. And multitasking is not something I do very, very well. So I appreciate everybody. All right. So, and all right. So let's get farther into this list. So why is ISA in S tier, right? Because it's kind of basically being rated against two other assault organizations, because being an operator and doing operations is not just about shooting, and finding the target often is even harder than killing the target. It definitely takes much, much longer. And there's a lot more work that has to go involved, which is the mapping network, understanding relationships, developing intelligence, and finding someone who doesn't want to be found is not easy. It can take months. It can take years. The raid may just take 15 minutes, may take an hour, may take a couple hours. And everybody focuses on the door kicker. Everybody focuses on SEAL Team 6 and who killed Bin Laden, right? It wasn't until, later do you see, movies like Zero Dark 30 of like how many years of work and how much thousands and thousands of hours of manpower did it take to even find this guy, right? Because the assault force doesn't know which door to kick, but someone has to do it. Somebody has to put in the work. And that's one of the reasons why ISA is in this organization. And you guys might think that I have a lot of bias for ISA. I don't. Actually, I'm probably the biggest critic of ISA. And I can tell you because I've seen a lot of different things. What's the funny thing about this? Okay, the Marine Security Response Team. Got you. I think I tipped the last one. So we are confusing the intel guy with their acronyms. What's the funny thing about that? So if you're in the Army and you go and you're attached to Navy, right? Like, for example, when I went to go work with SEAL Team 6, you have to learn a whole new language of acronyms, because even the United States Navy uses completely different acronyms than the Army does. And the Marines do as well. So there are so many acronyms in my head. And then I will, now that I've been working in the civilian world for a bit now, then there's acronyms that are completely different over here that I can get confused with the military acronyms. Everybody likes to use acronyms for all the same different letters and all this other thing. Where does Mossad rank? All right. So Mossad is not a special, military special operations unit per se. It is closer to it's an intelligence organization similar to the CIA, NSA, things like that. So obviously I could have done that, but I feel like that's a completely different ranking system, and that would need to be ranked alongside intelligence organizations. That's where I would put that. Oh, SDV, SEAL delivery vehicle. That's very. Are you asking? I didn't know that. Are you talking about the guys who are? To be honest, I don't even know if that's even a unit. I just thought it was something that people do. I assume that's what the SWIC guys do, or that they train operators at SEAL Team 6 or whatever the SEALs to do this. I didn't know they actually, do they have MOSs for STV? See, I'm not 100% sure. You can tell me. As the French, the Italians, and the Germans are one of the best in Europe. So there's a lot of, it's interesting because Les Demandog, in this list, you'll actually see at the very bottom, you'll see the German FSK. I believe it's the German FSK. A lot of these things start to go, they've had a lot of organizational issues, right? and they have had a number of issues that they've had to almost reorganize the entire unit. They actually had to get rid of an entire company because of some mistakes that were made. And so here's the thing. I think a lot of people get stuck on the fact that units were really good a couple of decades ago, right? And we do the same thing at soccer, right? For example, everybody's like, Brazil is Brazil, right? Brazil has not been Brazil since 2002, right? Like, look at Germany. They beat the crap out of the technically the greatest country in World Cup soccer, Brazil, 7-1 in Brazil, and went on to the World Cup, right? Now Germany just got knocked out by Paraguay, right? So obviously shit happens, but this is just an example, a parallel of, like, just because something was good a while ago doesn't mean it's still good today, right? And there's a lot of European special operations units that were really good in the 90s, 80s, maybe early 2000s, but the way that Europe has sort of went through this phase where they have almost, now they're upping their funding because of all the stuff that's going on in NATO right now, but they weren't funding their militaries. They weren't giving the training that they needed for their special operation units to stay at the same level that all the other world special operations who were funding their special operation units to get better, to adapt, to get better equipment. A lot of these units are still stuck with the same equipment that they were using 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. And that requires money. That requires money. It requires funding and purpose and planning and all these different things. And so that's one of the things that I've seen with European special operations is a lot of them have fallen to where they were when they were first created in the 90s, because the difference between Americans and European special operations. All right, guys, hold on one second. Apparently my camera's overheating. Give me 1 second. This is so fucking stupid. All right. Did not know you could even do this. All right. All right. Sorry, we're back. So I don't know if you guys saw that. It said my camera was overheating. So let me increase the air conditioning real quick. See if that helps. All right, we're back. So apparently my air conditioning is not working right now. So what's the point of living in America if we don't have any air conditioning? Because that's the main reason why we're here, right, boys? All right, anyways. So what about JTF2? It will be in part 2, trust me. All right, so let's go down here. All right, before we start, because I'm going to start covering, we're going to start going over a couple of the units that we will see in part 2. All right. Oh man, coming in small fry. 35 Papa is SS plus tier 1. Absolutely. If you're a linguist and you know languages, bro, there's nothing harder than bros from DLI. I'm just telling you that right now. If you guys know, you know. Right? Okay. In a scenario where ISA operators have an unexpected opportunity to capture, kill a main target, could they be authorized to, instead of waiting for an assault element? Yes. And that's one of the reasons why ISA still needs to have a tactical background and a tactical detachment, is because just in case that the target needs to be taken out and there's no other assets, and the alternative is people losing the target, there could be a situation where an ISA operator on the ground could be given authorization to essentially take the target. Yes. So CIA Special Activities Division. So that was something I considered putting in here. But that's something also I will consider later. So the interesting thing about the CIA Special Activities Division, right? So they are very interesting because they are, what's the best way to put this? So a lot of tier 1 operators and even tier 2 operators who are frustrated with the lack of, because even though the tier 1 units get a lot of permissions to do things, you are still a military organization. You are still under the Department of Defense / the Department of War, and you are still limited by their bureaucracy. You are still limited to what the Department of War is allowed to do, which can be a lot, but it's not a lot in comparison to the authorities that the CIA has. And so what the difference is Special Activities Division of the CIA is will typically be a collection of your tier 1 and tier 2 operators, right? And they're trained to a very high level, right? Very close to Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 standards. But they have a lot more authorities. And they have way less red tape and bureaucracy for them to pursue their targets and to take missions on, right? So the cool thing is everybody that I know, including my mentors who left ISA and who went to the Special Activities or the CIA SAD, basically told me that, all right, we're going to have to let this cool for a second. We're going to be back up. Apparently I need to put a fan on this thing. I didn't know my camera could overheat. So we're just going to give it a second to cool down. But essentially the SAD is, they go there and they're like, hey man, it's awesome here because we finally get to do all the missions we always intended to do, which is great. But so it's a different organization. We could definitely put it on here. The more I think about it, we probably will put it into tier 2. So look, now that you've said it, I say let's put it into part 2. Will be an interesting to where to put it. And I'm going to have to do a lot of thinking about this. So I apparently need to put a fan on this puppy. So we're just going to keep doing this until my camera stops cooling. Because apparently the air conditioning had shut off, and that's why it's getting so hot in this room. Because actually I'm starting to sweat. Anyways, if you guys can still hear me, all right, let's continue. Let's see. If you have Rangers, should you also consider British Parachute Regiment and Royal Marine Commandos? Both have their own special units, Pathfinders and Mountain Leaders. Yes. So I could technically consider all these units, right? You have to understand how many of these units there are in the world, right? Because just look at the American special operations, right? Almost every country has this many special operations units. Well, maybe not every country, but the British do, right? Or more elite infantry, more elite organizations that they consider, right? At some point, I can't include every special operations unit in the world in this list. Even if we were to do, unless we did 10 parts of this thing, right? And if that's what you guys want, I can consider it. But for now, I'm going to go with probably part 2 is probably going to focus on most of the foreign special operations that I didn't cover. We will include 2 more American, which will be the CIA SAD. And there's another one I'm thinking about doing. And I'll get back to you on that one. But at some point, I do have to draw the line, right? I cannot do, I can't do every single unit that's considered elite in the world, if that makes sense. But I will definitely look into a lot more of the British stuff. That's definitely, it is what it is. Yeah. Splinter Cell. What's that? Splinter Cell Online. PS. Okay. I'd love to see you do human and other tech strategy DoD rankings together, or separate who's the most capable in the intel space. Appreciate you doing these. I can definitely consider it. I'll be honest, that's a little bit harder to rate because, as an example, the CIA, their science and technology division is like they're basically their version of the NSA, and it's pretty good, right? It doesn't have the same scale as the NSA, but it's pretty good. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. I wish, bro, honestly, I wish it wasn't this heat, because I'm in Virginia, and it's like close to 100 degrees out here. All right, now, bro, small fry, now you're making me blush, right? AC is not a right, it's a privilege. All right, I love this, guys. You got it. Let's see, now you rank the special forces, maybe realize something in Latin America and many European countries. People confuse special forces with commando style. Look, there is definitely, people use different terms. For example, why did I use the term special forces when talking about the world, right? Because in the world, when they think of their special operations, they think of the term special forces. But you can't do that in the United States. Do you know why you can't do that when talking about American special operations? Because there's only one unit in all of the United States who is allowed to say special forces, and that is the Green Berets. The Green Berets have the term special forces. It's even in their tab, and because of that, no other special unit can be called special forces in the United States, right? But almost everywhere in the world, special forces is used for the same term as special operations. But then let's go to Australia, right? Australia has two special operations organizations. You have the Australian SASR, which is essentially the Australian version of the SAS, and you have your second commandos, which commandos is a term that used to be used in the 80s and 90s predominantly to describe what we now call operators, right? So take all these terms with a grain of salt, right? And just know that just because something is called a commando doesn't mean as an operator, right? Those are kind of two terms that are kind of interchangeable. Just one was used in a different era of time, right? Are things still called commandos nowadays? Yeah, but not nearly the same way that everything's called an operator now, because back in the 80s and 90s, everything was called a commando. I hope that makes sense. What about Delta, G Squadron, Recce, GRS? In what aspect? So we're doing full units, right? We're not breaking down squadrons. VFT Valhalla on YouTube was saying that a lot of burnout operators are guys who get in trouble from Delta or go to CIA SAC. Well, if they're burnt out in the fact that they're frustrated with their missions, then yes. Because the op tempo at the CIA Special Activities Division is higher. I will be honest, it's higher than the tier 1 op tempo. Everybody that I know that has went there is like, you can basically go there and do 3 years, but you'll be burnt out because it has a higher op tempo than the tier 1 units. Do you think it's unrealistic for a guy from 20 Special Forces group to go to RRC selection? I'm going to be honest. I don't know if you can go to RRC selection without being a range, or if you're not Ranger qualified. All right. We're allowing the camera to cool again. Let's see. Yeah, for some reason, my air conditioning is not working. I don't understand this. Apparently, I need a fan in here. Anyways, let's keep going. I'll turn the camera back on in a few minutes. I appreciate everybody staying with me. You guys are awesome. VFT has gone full retard, though once he was a legit dude. Yeah, I kind of rope him into the same category as what do you call? Candace Owens, right? Because I used to really like Candace Owens, but I feel like some people just get lost in the tinfoil hat stuff and just kind of lose their mind. And I would honestly even say that Shawn Ryan's headed that way a little bit, but hopefully not. Good morning, Michael Kane. How you doing, brother? All right. Maybe if only I had like ice pack. All right. So let's see. Have you worked with the Dutch KCT, the Corps Commando Troop? I actually have not. I know of the Dutch KCT, but I have not personally worked with them personally. Who are the best jungle fighters? That is a great question. Usually whoever's the best jungle fighters are the people who kind of probably train and have to fight in the jungles the most. And yeah, I'm not sure who's. I can just tell you from who's probably the most capable out of intelligent organizations, whether or not who you fight in a desert or jungle place or terrain will determine. It's that I think that's just really subjective. I think if you are a capable operator, you can operate anywhere, because when you're going through these selections and these OTCs, you are trained to operate in almost every environment. You definitely train for it. Yeah, I imagine countries in the Philippines, probably their special operations are probably going to have a bit of a leg up in as far as the jungle operations, right? Just like special operations that come from the mountains in the Arctic, like the Norwegians and the Scandinavian countries probably do Arctic operations, are probably a lead, have a bit of an advantage even over American special operations in those, because they do it all the time, right? What do you think of Joe Kent? So if you guys have seen my videos, I actually knew Joe Kent more as an acquaintance. So we were in the unit together. And when I say the unit, I mean ISA. I know some of you get all fucking butthurt about the unit means Delta Force, right? No. When you're in an organization, because it is technically a military unit, and you're not allowed to say the name, because you don't say the activity there. Nobody says the activity, because the activity is a name the unit used in the 80s, and we're not allowed to say it, right? So we're in a military unit. We're not allowed to say the name. So how do you think we refer to our unit? We refer to it as the unit. Yes, I understand that Delta Force had a show called The Unit, and they do refer to their unit as the unit, but also in ISA, we refer to our unit as the unit because it's our unit, and we don't really have another way to call it. So it is what it is. So I know it's a bit of a tangent, but so what do I think of Joe Kent? Right? I actually really like Joe Kent. He was a man of character. He was a Green Beret. Then he came to ISA, and then he went to the CIA, and he worked in the Special Activities Division. And that entire time, nobody's ever said anything bad about you. And I can tell you, in special operations, that is a really hard feat. Everybody dislikes everybody at some point, and the fact that nobody ever had anything bad to say about him means that it was probably it's very impressive, to be honest. And he always struck me as a person of high character. He had a great reputation. So when he came out and resigned his position, right around when the Iran stuff and Operation Epic Fury happened, I was a big proponent on. I disagree with his current stance on Iran, but let's hear the man out. Let's hear the man talk. He's definitely earned it. So I disagree with his stance on Iran, or Iran, but I still think he's a good person, and he was definitely a very good operator. I have always compared foreign commando units to the Rangers. I think that I have as well. All right. Anyways. You've said a few times that Whiteside SEALs needed DEVGRU are toxic in ways that CAG isn't. Have you perceived the same toxicity in any foreign unit? Okay, so this is a good question, but I'll tell you why I'm not able to answer this, because I don't know. Because think about this, right? When you think about you being at a tier 1 unit, think about you being at Delta Force and SEAL Team 6, and you are working with, you get a group of Rangers attached to you or something like that. When you have a unit that is not as big, doesn't have as much funding, right? They are now attached to you to help you do your operation. They are like there to help, and they are like on their best behavior. That's kind of how foreign units are when you work with them. So there may be toxicity within these units, but we are never going to see it because they are on their best behavior because we are giving them capabilities that they don't ever have. So there may be, but we're not, honestly, in the positions that we're at, we're never going to see it, if that makes sense. Can you add Canadian Special Operations, the CSOR? I will definitely look into it. JTF2 is on the list. I'm going to go through the list. I'm probably going to pick about 15 because that's how many was in this list. And I'm going to try to make the video, because obviously I can't go over 2 hours. I could technically, but I want to make it shorter. I think even 2 hours is too long. So who do you got, France or Spain? That's a good question. I think that France is a more dangerous team. I think Spain is a more solid team, but it's one game. So that's a good question. I think Spain has actually beaten France the last 3 times they played together. So France, I kind of want France to win just so France can play. This is what I want for the finals. I want France versus England. It's going to be like a historical matchup because anybody who knows the history between England and France, they've had a long history of being opponents from each other, right? Except for the one time when Germany was involved. So I think France, Mbappe versus Harry Kane and Bellingham would be an amazing matchup. And that's who I want to win this game. But I do think Spain's going to win this match. But France has an uphill battle because Spain is such a solid team. Pixel Shooter. To be honest, man, you could go over 2 hours in my opinion. The longer form content is a lot better from you special operations guys. Well, there I appreciate it. I guess at the end of the day, you either listen to it or you don't. So we'll probably just aim for, I'll probably do the same format as this, which is about 15 units. And we'll use this same list, right? So we'll just add to it. And we'll probably just do about a 2 hour. I know that when my production team, when I sent them the video for them to edit it, they're like, holy fuck, brother, this is going to take us forever. That's why this video took 2.5 weeks to do, for it to come out. Because it was actually supposed to come out 2.5 weeks ago. Yeah. So we'll see. Do you ever work with any Army career Rangers? I've always wondered what kind of person stand the level of high tempo for so many years. I appreciate the video. Well, we actually have career Rangers at ISA. The general special operations community looks so highly on Rangers. Rangers are like the gold standard of discipline and professionalism and hard work. They're the special operations like grunts, elite infantry, like everybody, even SEALs like Rangers begrudgingly. It's kind of hard not to. England's defense would not be able to handle France. Probably not. But I think it would be a cool matchup. But hey, maybe England comes out, like they have an uphill battle. I think England is not the favorite to win this tournament. Honestly, I think Spain and France are the two best teams. And it's kind of sad that they are going to be a semifinal match and not the final match. But yeah. But I think it would be cool if England make it all the way and win their first World Cup in 60 years. What's your response if Mike Glover does a reaction video on this? Reaction video on what? Reaction video to my video? To be honest, if people want to do reaction videos to this, cool. If not, whatever. I'm going to tell you one thing that I'm never going to get involved in. I'm never going to get involved in this vet bro drama. I really don't care. But if people want to react to this video, they can react to this video. You know, it's all an opinion. You know, honestly, I would love to see other people's perspective, because remember, this is just my perspective. I have a unique perspective, but that doesn't mean my perspective is correct. You know, and I know that everybody in special operations generally tends to work with like 1 or 2 foreign special operations. I just had the unique experience to not only know what the inside of ISA was like, I know what the inside of Delta's like, I know what the inside of DEVGRU is like, and I've worked with many of these special operations units on this list, which is one of the reasons why I chose these. You know, I keep saying this. Let's count them. Let's see, 5, that's 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay, so 17. All right, we've overheated again. All right, so God, we are just learning so much about streaming, aren't we, today? He would probably agree with most of what you say, to be honest. Probably. But, you know, honestly, it would be cool for it would be cool for someone like Mike Glover to do to cover the rankings on this particular thing, because you know, I'm pretty proud of the analysis I do. I think a lot of what I have seen from a lot of other military guys who rank these videos or these units, they do it more of like their like emotional feeling and just whatever. Like they don't do it as analytically as I did it. I would have to say, you know, I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I'm a very highly analytical person, and this is the way that I get to do things like this. Oops. Sorry. Andy Stumpf is a level-headed guy. He is. He's actually one of my favorite special operations content creators. I really like him. I like Mike Gritland, and I like Brent. I like people who are analytical. Both Andy Stumpf and Mike Gritland I think are probably the 2 best. Brent Tucker surprised the shit out of me. Like, you wouldn't think by looking at Brent that he's that intelligent. Like, he doesn't look like, he kind of looks like a caveman to me. Granted, I look like a caveman, so who am I to talk? But I was really impressed with how intellectually, how smart Brent was. Brent Tucker is a very, very smart person. And when I was down there doing his podcast, we had some awesome conversations. And so, Brent will surprise the shit out of you with how smart he is. But Andy Stumpf and Mike Ritland are so analytical, and I love that about them. My other 2 favorite content creators is who's that? What's his name? The Dalton guy. Dalton. The one he does like a podcast like once every 3 months. Right? What is it? Dalton Fisher. Dalton Fisher. That's what it is. So all right. Yes, and he does. He constantly complains that the teams need to be unfucked. Yeah, there's some issues there. Not everybody there sucks, right? There's a lot of that. Obviously, they do a lot of amazing things, but there is definitely some cultural issues and some organizational things going on there that they should probably fix. So, and that's also the other thing is I feel like anybody, and one thing also I like about Andy stuff is that he has no problem like calling out, you know, his organization or his former organization. Just like if you want somebody to talk shit about ISA, I'm your boy, right? I'll talk shit. I don't care, right? But it's not going to be out of because I might be butthurt about something. I think you should be critical of everybody, and you should be across the board, especially where you come from. Yes. If you have not seen it, watch 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 Brett Tucker in that Tier 1 podcast. He's an awesome dude. Dalton from Roadhouse. Which question won't appear? If you typed in a question, type it in again. Thoughts on the Jocko podcast? I'm going to be honest. I've never seen a full Jocko podcast. I do see clips all the time, and I do like what Jocko says. So every clip that I've ever seen of Jocko, I like it. And honestly, I've probably, if you guys go to my Instagram, I've got a number of Jocko clips that I have republished on my thing of Jocko saying whatever quote that he's famous for and all these different clips. So I like it. I've just never actually seen an actual full episode of the Jocko podcast. So I like Jocko. I like what he says. So I assume I would like his podcast, but I can't really say because I haven't really seen a full episode. Yes, I would definitely say Jocko is a great motivation, not just with people know discipline, but even if you have discipline, right? It kind of helps to reaffirm it. And highly recommend Jocko podcast with Pat Mack. Who is Pat Mack? Oh, Pat McAfee, right? Is that, or, oh wait. Pat McNamara? Oh, that's who Pat Mack is. I immediately saw, when I typed in Pat Mack, it typed in Pat McAfee and Pat McNamara, the retired Special Operations Sergeant Major with 22 years of, including 13 years in Delta Force. All right. So let's get into this. All right, we've got about 12 minutes before the game starts. All right, so let's talk some units for part 2. All right, the Polish GROM. All right, here we're at, right? So let's talk about the pros. Let's talk about some cons. I'm not going to give you a rating because we're going to save that for the video. So the Polish GROM, their pros are they have a strong NATO integration. They have a significant counterterrorism and direct action focus within the unit. They are built with a Western soft influence, right? Because anywhere in the world, like you can be borrowing things from Eastern stuff, like because Poland, was a part of the Warsaw Pact at one point on the other side of the Soviet Union, and obviously could have taken their soft influence from the Spetsnaz, but they did not. They took it from Western. And they also have extensive post-Cold War operational relevance. Their cons is Poland cannot match American Tier 1 funding or support infrastructure. They are a smaller national special operations ecosystem, and their public information on some current capabilities is limited. So remember, this is all based on publicly available information. So where would you guys on this list put the Polish GROM? So, because Polish GROM will definitely be going into part 2. Where do you guys think are going to go on this list, if you had to guess, with my analytical criteria? All right. Next unit going on the list for part 2 is the Norwegian FSK. Oh man, pixel shooter coming right in with the C, just dropping, giving pretty much the equivalent F-bomb. All right, Norwegian FSK. It is, so one, they operate in an extremely demanding operational environment. They have strong cold weather and Arctic capabilities. They are definitely one of the leading special operations units that's experts in Arctic warfare. So even like when the United States wants to practice Arctic stuff, we will go to countries like Norway and work with their special operations just because they do it so often and it is their specialty. They have a great NATO level integration. And they do have national level special operations roles. Their cons is they're a very small force. And also, you got to remember, Norway's kind of a small country. They only have 5.6 million people. Very, very, I think it's one of the most highly dispersed populations to land mass coverage ratios. So it's a small force, and they have a limited national scale, and they have a smaller support infrastructure compared to the larger NATO countries. So they have even less funding than some of these larger NATO countries like France and Germany and the British. So, but their unique characteristic is the Arctic. As the strategic importance of the high north increases, Arctic capability will become increasingly relevant, and they will become, because of it, even more increasingly relevant. So where would you guys put, if you had to predict where the Norwegian FSK is going to go, where would you put the boys? Ooh, the Rhodesian SAS. Oh, if you know, you know. Wasn't Leonardo DiCaprio Rhodesian SAS? Oh, you know what? I think it did. Let me go back. I may have skipped over it. Let me go back. Yes, I found it. From Dario. Hey, man, what do you think about the Mexican Army, Navy Special Forces, and all the experience they've amassed over the last few years during the internal conflict inside Mexico? So this is a good thing to bring up, right? All right. We're going to I feel like every time that I'm going to talk about something that is legit before this game starts, I feel like the camera goes off every single time. Who would have thought that your camera... All right, let me try this. Maybe me not having it plugged in won't necessarily help as well. So just give me 2 seconds. I want to answer this while there's an actual camera feed. Okay. All right. So Dario asked, hey man, what do you think about the Mexican Army, Navy Special Forces, and all the experience they've amassed over the last few years during the internal conflict inside Mexico? This is a very good, interesting factor that I want everybody to understand. One of the reasons why units can get better than other units is combat experience. One of the reasons why the American Special Operations Unit have gotten so good is because we've been at basically American Special Operations, especially the Tier 1 level, have basically been at war for the last 2 decades. Israeli units are very effective because they have constant combat experience. The Mexican Special Operations units definitely have gotten a lot of combat experience in the last couple of years dealing with the cartels. So when you get a lot of combat experience and you're an organization that adapts and you learn, you get better. So the units that have definitely fallen off from their high points in the 80s and 90s, and I will probably label a lot of the European special operations organizations that probably fall into this, is a lack of combat experience. Yes, some of them have been doing it, and some have been joining us and on our tirades and everything like that. But if your special operations organization is not getting in combat experience, you're not adapting. You're not developing TTPs and tactics that adapt with a new age, and you're going to be stuck doing stuff that no longer works anymore. So I want to use that question as a point to that is definitely one of the factors that will help one of these units rise within this tier system is combat experience. And the reason why all the American Tier 1 units are the top 3 is because we've been at war. We've been constant. We've been between the funding and our combat experience is the reason why we're at the top, right? And it's why everybody else now looks to us, just in the way that we used to work to the British SAS. Because remember, the British SAS were getting tons of combat experience back in the day for a number of different reasons, dealing with internal, external, you know, dealing with Ireland, all these different, all the different things throughout the world. The British SAS was getting a lot more, but we've been getting the most combat experience, maybe outside of Israel. No, we still weren't getting more combat experience than them. Man, you guys are just reaming on me for the way I say shit. That's just rude. Is funding the biggest factor in separating A+ and above units? Probably A. Yes. Well, it's not just that. It's funding, and then the intelligence ecosystem. Well, actually, the overall ecosystem that supports them. So not only does these individual units, the A+ and above, have more funding, but the organizations, even outside of the funding, the way that the ecosystem is developed is designed to support them. So overall, they have an ecosystem around them that has more funding and is designed to support them even more. So like the British SAS, not only do they not have this funding, they don't have the same intelligence and support ecosystem around them that it supports them, as well as all the tier 1 units that they A+. So it's not just funding, it's also I would say an intelligence and support ecosystem that surrounds them. Does more funding truly improve peak capacity, or just global reach and distribution? I actually say that it improves all three. It definitely improves peak capacity, but it also improves global reach and distribution, because if you have the funding, right, you can go anywhere you want to. If you ain't first, you're last, baby. All right. So we got about 2 minutes before we get off and we watch some soccer, baby, or some football for my European sense. So, Dario, I hope I answered your question. Oh, actually, I probably didn't. So you're like, what do you think about the Mexican Special Forces? I definitely think that they have came a long way in the last couple of years. And they will probably be in part 2, possibly part 3. Dario, is chasing a green card at 19-year-old old beaner to join the Rangers? Green Berets at 22 once they get a good goal. Do you think joining the Rangers at 22 is old? No, it's not. I've actually heard of people joining the Rangers as high as like the 30s. So you're definitely good. You know what's the funny part? If anybody actually knows where the term soccer come from, people think that the Americans invented it. We did not. The British invented the term soccer. It was used as a word. It was kind of like a shorthand, like colloquially a word to describe football, because in certain, like Eton College and other places like that, they come up with like little colloquials and little sayings to describe other words that aren't the words. And they actually came up with soccer in England, and then we brought it over here. So we're not even the ones that came up with it. So stop bringing that shit on us. Oh, absolutely. All right. Well, I appreciate all of you. It is 3 o'clock. It's time to watch Spain versus France. Thank you, everybody, for sticking with me. You guys are amazing. And we will be working on, I will be recording part 2 of this video this week. And hopefully we'll see how long that takes everybody to get out. Everybody have a good day, and we'll see who wins this game.